When you're looking at truth, you need to know the truth, Jesus. And then that gives you a framework and a grid of reference and a point then to be able to look at what is true and what isn't true, and what's a mixture of true and what's hiding the truth, and all of these things. Because it's so difficult to actually look at any media stream and know exactly what's true. I mean, even you can look at a video and it could be a total deep fake. So even actually looking at it with your own eyes, unless you were there, you can't categorically state, oh, that must be the truth because this happened. Because technologically, they're able to fabricate anything nowadays. They're even able to fabricate people saying things that they never said.
With artificial intelligence,
yes. I mean, all this deep fake stuff. I mean, literally, they have the technology to take a video of someone and manipulate that video to get them to say anything they want them to say. And it looks absolutely real. So I don't think we've got any chance really of looking at anything like that and making a decision without discernment. And the discernment comes through knowing the frequency of the truth, Jesus. And then when you look at something, you sense whether it's true or not. And I've looked at some things that people, sort of 5 seconds into it, I said, this is rubbish. This isn't true. This is an absolute fabrication of lies, or a total deception where someone believes it's true, but it isn't. So we've got to know the truth. The truth is a relationship with a person, yes. Jesus, the truth. And I think if we have that, it will keep us safe from believing a lot of the conspiracies that are out there, a lot of the stuff which is hiding the truth and mixing the truth. So it sort of gives you a little bit of truth, but with a whole lot of lies, or you get the truth, but you get some lies added to it, and that's the problem, because there's a campaign to literally deceive people for whatever reason. Some of it's financial, some of it's political. I mean, how much was social media used in previous political campaigns to target swing voters with lies, presenting it as truth so they would vote a particular way? And literally that happened in the UK with the Brexit vote, that happened in the US with their elections. Literally they thought, we only need to target a small group of people here and we can change the whole political landscape. And we can do that by the sort of AI and particularly algorithms that pick up what those people are watching, listening to, interested in, and then using targeted ad campaigns on Facebook and other social media platforms, so that they're subliminally programmed, because they keep seeing these adverts and things coming up and promotions coming up all the time. So you've got to be really careful you don't buy into it. And it's really easy to buy into that because it's so much out there in the public domain. But we've got to show more discernment as believers we do have the truth. So when I was looking into all sorts of conspiracies, all sorts of different things, when I was writing my sort of previous book, I just didn't know what to believe. I could look at the Encyclopedia Britannica and say, well, it says this, but who wrote it? Yeah. Why did they write it? No, I think some things they wrote genuinely because they were things. But if you're reading in an encyclopedia the account of, let's say, the American War of Independence, and you read it in an American version, you're going to read a very different story if you read it in the English version. Yeah. Because they're coming from their own particular standpoint and framework in what they're writing. They're not, I don't think, deliberately trying to mislead anybody, but they're actually writing from their perspective. And the winners of the conflict write their perspective, and the losers write their perspective. And they sound very different when you read them. So, so I had to say, okay, I went to the Father, said, you want me to write this book, but how do I know what's true? Because some of the things that I think are true seem to be packaged in something that I would find totally unacceptable. So how can I quote something from a source which I see as totally unreliable and biased completely, and yet that was true. So I was talking to the father about it and said, look, this is really, really hard. It's easy to write a book when you're just writing about your testimony and the things that you've engaged with. But when you're trying to find out, well, this is what happened in history, this is the what was behind this in history, there was this thread throughout history where these things were being done for a political system or a religious spirit position. I'm like, I'm sort of stuck here. I'm not an academic as such, so I'm not going to try and delve into the academic things, because again, well, are they true? Are they not true? So the father said to me, well, you have got the greatest fact checker in the universe in Jesus the truth. Bring something to him and see what the frequency feels like. See whether it is true or not. So I used some things which were sources that I would not normally use to say, here's an article that says this. I wouldn't normally use that, but I fact checked it with Jesus, and it was true. But I wouldn't say to people, well, read this because it's always true. So you've got to look at every single thing, not look at the source and reject it or accept it because of it's a source you normally would receive or reject, and take it back to the truth to see what is the truth in this. And then once you spend time with the genuine and with the truth and with love, then you find it easier to be discerning, because you train your senses to pick up things which aren't true and to draw from those things which are true. And of course, Jesus is the truth, and he's deposited in truth in all sorts of writings, so that people can discover it when reading a load of rubbish. And then what really shocked me was the deliberate using truth to then promote a particular agenda or purpose. And I read this article, and it was an article which was critiquing this whole great financial reset, the Gasara reset of finances in the world, and all debt's going to be cancelled and all this stuff, which is out there in La La Land, and a lot of it gets, promoted in Christian circles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they tie it into, the great wealth transfer and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So they're suckers. They buy into stuff like that. And scammers target Christians because they just need to throw in a few kingdom phrases. And Christians are like, oh, wow, this is going to be the money, and I'm going to invest in this. Hence, people invested in Iraqi dinars and all that stuff, never, ever got anything back, lost all their money, because they were advised by so-called prophetic people who had insight in heaven that this was the great reset. Never happened, but they believed it. And all the sort of terminology sort of used in promoting their idea, well, I understand G7 and G this and G that and G the other. And actually none of it, no clue. Oh, insider trading, I can't let you know my sources. Absolute rubbish. And yet, I don't know how many thousands of people, quite a few that I know, bought into that, took out loans to buy Iraqi dinars, and they got stacks of these worthless paper.
And they're doing it for the kingdom.
Yeah, all for the kingdom, because this is going to be promoting the kingdom, all that stuff. There was things, Omega Trust and Trading, bank debenture schemes, all this stuff. And they use things, right? They know how to target gullible Christians with a few choice phrases that will get them to invest. And unfortunately, people did, because they're not discerning. As soon as I heard all that stuff back in 2011, 12, and it was like, okay, Father, do you want me involved in this? Nope. So then I looked into it, and it's just like, where are all these Iraqi dinars coming from? Eastern Europe. It's like, who's making the money out of this? Same people, So we've got to be very careful. It's amazing how you can convince yourself that something is true.
Yes.
Many years ago, there was a group of leaders I was involved with in the Southwest in England, and someone picked up on this Omega Trust and Trading with this guy called Clive Hood, And he used terms about funding the kingdom and transfer of wealth and all this stuff. And basically, it was a bank debenture scheme, which is a scheme which is you can gear a small amount of money into a large amount of money, and then you only need to buy and see currency shift by a small amount, and you make lots of money. And that's the theory. And so you gave $100 and you had to send cash, which is okay. That's a bit dodgy. And there were these two guys, Clive Hood and Mike Kadowski, and these guys were in the US, and people were mailing them masses through funds of credit and things by cash, so they could go and draw out the cash. Then they would send you this thing, and it was always just about to happen. You got this pack coming, which will tell you how to access the wealth. And then you've got these forums, which the white knights in the forum, the ones who've got the insider government information. Oh, this is being spotted by Alan Greenspan at the time. He's stopping it. And the packages are all in the hubs in Atlanta ready to go out. And they spun this story on and on and on. And people just doubled down into this story, believing it and believing it and believing it, encouraging more and more Christians to send in their $100, and their $100 was going to release millions. Literally. And but this thing was called Omega Trust and Trading. And then all the leaders in the Southwest, including myself, who were like, okay, is this true? Then we're noticing we had a security van service called Omega, with the Omega sign on it, blue vans, bright blue vans, and you saw them everywhere. I never noticed one before, but as soon as we were looking at Omega Trust and Trading, and all these guys were saying, look at this, this is a confirmation. I keep seeing Omega vans. I keep seeing his Omega vans.
I've done that.
Yeah, and you're convincing yourself that is the sign that this must be true. And literally, of course, in the end, the US government tracked down these guys and put them in jail, because and they used mail fraud things and all sorts, because they were sending money in the mail, and they gave them loads of years in the end. But they scammed mostly Christians out of millions and millions of pounds and dollars, because Christians want to believe something like that. They want to believe in this almost miraculous thing that's just going to happen and give them everything. And recently, and this is quite sad, really, but there was another trading thing, and trading Bitcoin and whatever, and someone sort of contacted me and sort of said, look, I want to give you some money so you can invest in this Bitcoin trading platform using this trading algorithms and whatever. So I'm like, oh, well, okay, if you want to, I wouldn't put any more my money into it. But if you want to give me something into it, that's fine. I'll look at it. And, it started off, and you were getting, basically 300% more every week, and you could draw some, but you're not allowed to take any out for 90 days. And then it's just like, okay, great. And then it's like, okay, after 90 days, you started taking money out. And I took, £3,000 or £4,000 out of it. I thought, oh, this is okay. But then it all started to go. And it was the Ponzi scheme, I think. But basically, all those who invested early, they made lots of money.
Yeah.
But then when people at the end of the thing started investing, then less and less people started investing, and there was no return. And then you couldn't get the money out for all weird reasons. Oh, we got this problem with the thing. There's an issue here. And they just kept spinning people a line. It's still going. It hasn't been shut down because it's not in the US. It's probably set in the Bahamas or somewhere. No, and again,
He there is getting in early.
Yeah, it was a genuine. Well, yeah, you get in early, you do make money, but you're making money on robbing it from someone else who's investing, and they lose their money. You're not making money out of trading. You're making money out of other people's investments, which is, again, immoral. But it was presented very well. All the website looked really kosher. You had all these YouTube videos on how to invest and how to put this and how to get money out, use it, Bitcoin and all this stuff. And because I didn't invest, I sort of like, well, I can't really lose here, and the person who wanted to bless me really did want to bless me. And there was a number of others that they also blessed, with quite a significant amount of money. And yet, something in me was like, well, okay, maybe this is, because I know robotic sort of trading, you can make money out of robots trading on your behalf and buying and selling a lot. And I wondered whether this was a platform that they were just doing it on a big scale. But then I looked into it, and then the amounts of returns that you were getting literally amounted to like 350% a year. And if you left it in and compounded it, if you left it in for 12 years, you'd have 3.7 billion pounds after 12 years of leaving it in at that rate.
Yeah, it's nonsensical.
And it's like, okay, well, if you left it in another 10 years, you'd have trillions of pounds. And I thought, well, if everyone did that, where's all this money coming from? Yeah. But sadly, the person who wanted to bless me, she made a lot of money in it, because someone got her into it in the early stages of it. She made lots of money, and then she wanted to give that money away and bless other people. But in reality, those that didn't draw any money out are now sort of stuck with this money, which isn't making anything and isn't actually, you can't access it.
Yeah.
I decided that I was, once I got to the 90 days, I was going to start drawing out everything that it made every week. So yeah. I did get a few thousand out of it before it sort of closed down, but I could never draw the capital out. It just wouldn't let you. You're supposed to be able to, but every time I tried, you can only draw 5%, and you can only do it on Mondays, and you can only do it in the first 5 days of the month. And it just made it harder and harder, But, but when you do invest into it, you don't want to believe that it's wrong. And it shows the power of the mind to sort of convince you. And years ago with this Omega stuff, people were just consuming their time reading the forums and all of this, deep state, dark secrets, and why it's being held up and why they're trying to stop the money coming out, and they're using people's names, and these people run the forums. The people who take your money, they run the forums. They're in there putting all this misinformation out. And then you get some people who just buy into it. The same thing with buying into the whole, Q thing.
Yeah.
All these people buy into this thing, and then you suddenly get all these people that, I got it wrong, and others who still won't admit they got it wrong, including some quite well-known Christians who will not admit they got it wrong. And you get all of them, this prophetic movement, all prophesying this stuff is going to happen. And, it is sad, really.
But nothing ever happens that they prophesy. And then when they say this happened, it's like I listen to how they say this thing I said happened. And they explain it, and I'm still sitting to from what you said and that happening, I can't still tie the two together. I don't see how it happened.
No, it never happened.
You have to really bend and twist.
But you can convince yourself anything can happen to save face. And because you invest so much into it, you get deceived.
And they do hit the odd thing. But you know what? I hit the odd thing just with logic. Like, don't buy the Iraqi dinar,
No. Yeah, I just asked God, and God said, no, don't be involved in it. And then I never promoted it. And I said, look, I can't say don't do this, but be very careful. Make sure you're doing this because God told you to do it, not because you're just believing what other people have said and are being deceived, actually, because you want it to be true. When you want something to be true, and actually getting rich quick and having all this money to fund the kingdom, people want it to be true. And
well, is that a justification too?
Yeah. Someone
who want to be wealthy too.
They do, but but I'll use it for the kingdom. But people want it to be true are very easily deceived because they already believe in something and they want it to be true. So
that goes through what is the true motivation, I guess, of your heart.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And when I sort of started probing with the questions, and I'm not stupid, so I know what sort of questions to ask about these sort of things. And I can't tell you that information because it will be insider trading. And that was the answer. I'm like, you're having a laugh. It's like, you're not even a trader. So you telling me something is not inside trading. It's nonsense. You're just using rhetoric because you don't want to tell me. And actually, if you did tell me, I would know it wouldn't be true. And it's like, but ultimately, when we need to be discerning, that means we need to measure everything against the truth and make sure that we aren't just deceiving ourselves, wanting to believe something because we want it to be true.
Yeah.
And when I was given this money, it was like, and I wasn't given the money. I was given the investment, to manage. But fortunately, the lady did really bless me, and she did give me some actual cash, which was a blessing, and I honor her for that, and I really do honor her because I know her heart was absolutely in the right place, and I know she really wanted to bless those who were, kingdom workers and sort of wanting to bless them for their future, and I really appreciated that, and so I was really grateful. But the longer it went on, the more I began to question. Actually, this sounds like every other scheme. Once it's getting to a point where you can't get your money out, you can't actually get money out. It's harder and harder, but then it's like you get the thing, but people are blocking it at a high level. And, this is the enemy is trying to stop us getting the kingdom wealth and all this stuff. So you then buy into this conspiracy against this, rather than the simple, obvious fact, look, this was a scam. Sadly, it was. People made money, but other people lost money. So everyone who made money was on the back of someone losing money, which is a sad thing. But, all those things out there, was it Bernie Madoff or whatever or something,
Yeah.
this Ponzi scheme? People buy into it because it's get rich quick.
You had to fight for Bernie to take you on.
Yeah.
You wouldn't take everyone. You had to know somebody,
But that almost makes it seem like it's real.
Yeah.
It's that thing, that sort of double bluff, isn't it? Well, if it's that hard to get, it must be real.
Yeah.
But people lost their pensions, they lost fortune in it, because they're easily led by that. If something's too good to be true, usually it is. Now, I'm not saying every time, because God can do amazing things, and God can do things which are pretty out of the box, and he can get you to do something that is no one else should do. But in general, you've got to also be discerning about things that may start off and sound good. And of course, in this thing, the so-called lead, investor on it was a reverend. So it gives credence to Christians. A reverend, she must be kosher because she's a reverend. And then that gives you I can trust a reverend. There's a whole load of people in jail who are running ministries who you couldn't trust either, for whatever reason. And, I feel sorry for those who are genuine and really want to invest because they want to fund the kingdom, and for those who really wanted to bless me and others, and I honored them for what they wanted to do, but seemingly it just didn't work. It worked for a while and then didn't. But when you look to the facts, it was like, well, if you put 100 people in this and they're all in it for 20 years, there isn't enough money in the world to fund them. So where's that money coming from? Now you could say, well, it's coming out of the spiritual atmosphere. Well, maybe God can do some amazing things, but I think we just got to be careful when we're looking at a lot of these things. The enemy is a liar from the beginning, and Adam and Eve were deceived. Well, certainly Eve was, and Adam chose, but there was a deception with it that sounded good, but wasn't quite, which sort of, got them into independence, following a lie, and many of us have believed things which aren't true. now, it's like we're all there, got the hat, t-shirt and everything else, because we are susceptible to being programmed by things that sound true, or, religious doctrinal stuff, which really isn't true. I've just done a sort of Patreon teaching stuff on immortality, and I was I sort of wanted to touch on a few of the doctrines that really challenged me and challenged my view of God, of being love and everything else, and the things I believe which demonstrated God wasn't love, God was angry, and God was going to punish everybody. So penal substitutionary atonement was the major one in my deconstruction, because I was brought up in a very strong evangelical thing. That was just, that was truth. That was the truth. It was not a fact that could be questioned. God punished Jesus instead of us. That was what I was taught, what I was brought up with. And I never questioned it. I never really even thought about questioning it, because it was like, oh, God loves you so much. He's willing to punish his own son instead of me. He loves me so much. But I never thought about the implications of what that said about God. And then in any court in the land, if you were to say this multi-serial killer is going to get off because this child is going to be punished so they don't have to be punished, no court in the land would do it. Anywhere in the world would do it.
Yeah.
Why do we think God would do that? But that's what we were taught. So I went through this 7-point sort of thing on the problem with penal substitution atonement. I found a really good article online by this guy called Brian Finley, who would sort of put this together. And it struck a chord with me, and I thought, yeah, this is absolutely the problem, that we believed all this stuff because we were programmed that there was no other thing. And if you're not a theologian, you don't even think about stuff like, well, what are the other options? And until then, God started to then speak to me about deconstruction. I never even thought about it. But love and God's experiences in revealing love to me began to challenge that view. Because all of a sudden, how can this be true if God is love? How could he do this if God is love? This isn't even fair for him to do that. And then you sort of get this whole thing of, yeah, we believe that God's actually not good because he's going to punish you. But then we dress it up. Yeah, but that's because of his justice. God is love, but he's also just. So you've got to have him satisfying his justice by punishing some innocent person, Jesus, instead of me, who was guilty.
Which he doesn't want to do, but he has to.
He has to, because he's just. Well, then I looked into judgment and justice, and it's like, well, justice is the outworking of judgment. The verdict of the court is this person's innocent, so they go free. That's justice. If they're guilty, they're suffering the consequences of their crime because they're guilty. That's justice. But we're declared by God to be not guilty through what Jesus did on the cross. We're declared innocent. We're declared justified. We're declared righteous. God keeps no record of wrongs. Love keeps no record of wrongs. God does not hold our trespasses against us. So you get all of this evidence that God doesn't hold anything against anyone, and yet we've been told he does. And he can't even look upon sin because he's so holy. So you've got God's holiness, God's justice, and God's love competing, and you buy into it because it's just something you just believed. Oh, yeah, God can't look upon sin. Well, how ridiculous a statement is that? God wouldn't know anything going on in the world if he couldn't look upon all of the lost identity that's there, but he does. And I was, so blessed when I looked at Brad Jerzek's Gospel of the Chairs, the fact that God didn't turn away from us. We turned away from him. Then he went and moved the chair and sat in front of us again and tried to get us to trust him. And then, we turned away again and went our own way. And then he chased after us, and then he went and sat in front of us again. And that was such a powerful sort of refuting of that whole way of looking at what Jesus did on the cross, and the understanding of God as holy and just. And God is God. He is love. And of course he acts righteously and in justice, but it's based on his mercy and grace that he does so. So actually saying that God punished Jesus instead of us, that's not mercy. Mercy requires no one to be punished. Mercy says, I forgive you. You don't need punishment. I'm gonna free you because I'm going to be merciful to you. Well, God wasn't merciful to Jesus in that penal substitutionary claim. Well, he punished Jesus. Well, actually, he didn't. Because Jesus wasn't punished by God, he was punished by us. Mankind put him on the cross, mankind punished him, mankind killed him. God raised him from the dead so that all mankind could be raised from the dead. So you get this whole concept, but it doesn't take much of a deception to change a whole system of belief that none of the early church fathers believed, and no one believed up until the 11th century. And then it became the major mainstream doctrine of the Protestant Reformation through Calvin and others, which was then taken on by evangelicalism and presented as this cornerstone of the Christian faith. And when I first started to challenge penal substitutionary atonement, a lady who was in one of my mentoring groups at the time emailed me and said, "You are challenging the cornerstone of my faith, penal substitutionary atonement." So I emailed her back and said, "I'm really sorry if you feel offended that I'm challenging the cornerstone of your faith, but isn't Jesus the foundation of your faith? Aren't you putting your trust in Jesus, not in some doctrine?" But she was so angry with me, and she basically never contacted me again, because that was so fundamental to her belief system that God would punish Jesus instead of us. And it doesn't take much to twist something, and particularly if you're taking your doctrine from the Bible. Because you got Isaiah 53:10. God was pleased to crush him, or God was pleased to bruise him. And it's like, well, yeah, there it is in black and white. It pleased God to punish Jesus. But then you go and look at their understanding of God, and you think, well, they didn't even trust God because they were afraid of God. So they had this whole system that set up these sacrifices because they were afraid of God and needed to appease him. And then you get the prophets coming along who started to hear God prophesying this new covenant coming, and they completely changed their view. So then when the translators translated the Old Testament in Hebrew into Greek, they used completely different words because their revelation had changed. So it actually doesn't say that God was pleased to bruise him. It says God was pleased to cleanse him. And that was the version that Paul and Jesus would have used. Because what were they cleansing him of? Nothing that he'd done, but didn't he totally identify with us? So he was cleansing humanity. And God was pleased to cleanse humanity through Jesus, which totally changes and transforms the whole understanding of that truth. Completely changes it. And you think, wow. So if I believe that to be true, and I've believed that all of my life, that, oh, God was pleased to punish Jesus, then what else have I misunderstood? And what other Bible verses have I believed because I was told that they were true? Now our translation, therefore, forms our perception of God. So if we believe that God was pleased to bruise or to crush Jesus, to put him to grief, then what sort of God are we believing in? certainly not the Father that I know, who has shown himself to be a loving Father to me. He didn't do that. So how easy it is for us to believe something which aligns to some way that we thought, and our view of ourselves. I was brought up to believe Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things, beyond cure, who can understand it? So our heart is desperately wicked, effectively. Deceitful above all things. I can't trust my heart. So I believed that. And what did that say? My heart, my soul is primarily bad and needs to be crushed, needs to be suppressed, needs to be crucified. As I take up my cross and put my soul under crucifixion. Well, actually, God gave me a soul. My soul just needs to be healed and restored and made whole. So then again, you go back to the Septuagint in Jeremiah 17, it's verse 5 in the Septuagint. It says, the heart of man is deep beyond all things, and it is the man. That's what it actually says in their translation from what was in Hebrew to Greek, because they had a better understanding of God. And actually, it doesn't say that our heart is deceitful and beyond cure. It doesn't say that at all. He just says, this is who you actually are. And you cannot know yourself other than through the one who made you, effectively, which is what it's saying, which is a pretty powerful deception if you can get people to believe that we're totally wicked and will never be, because that promotes you're a sinner. Saved by grace, you're always going to be a sinner saved by grace. And therefore you need continually to confess your sin and repent because you're a sinner. So your identity is a sinner. Well, my identity isn't a sinner. My identity is a son, a saint of the Most High. My identity is one who is blessed and highly favored. My identity is who God says I am. But I believed for a long time that I was primarily bad because of verses like that said, the heart is wicked, deceitful above all things. And I believed that. I bought into it. So what does that promote? It promotes the need to keep doing stuff for God and working for it because you need to earn his favor and blessing. And you need to earn forgiveness. And you need to, because you're deceitful and you're generally seen as such a less than God made you. So it's a real challenge when you realize that the Bible has been translated in such a way by people, or has been written in such a way by people originally who didn't know God. So their version of God was never God in the first place. It's like God invited them up a mountain and they wouldn't go because they were afraid of him. Why were they afraid of him? Because they lived under the Egyptian system for so long that they would be conditioned by it, that they needed to offer a sacrifice. So Moses goes up the mountain to meet with God because they didn't want to go. And what are they doing? Making a golden calf and sacrificing to it because they didn't know God. And it didn't get any better. A few people knew God, like Caleb and Joshua, who were of a different spirit. They knew what God was like. And therefore they led people in to the promises because they knew what God was like. But those who generally never met God, they told stories and wrote stories of God that misrepresented him fully. Jesus and the Father are exactly the same. Same heart, same mind, same purpose, same love. Jesus is the express image of the Father. Absolute express image of the Father. So he came to reveal the Father. What did he come to do? Preach love. So deception is a huge thing. And I look back in my past and see how deceived I have been because I believe things which I now know totally misrepresent what God was like. But I didn't know that until I met him. And that is why we need experience of God. And if you can get people to just believe in God by faith and have no experience of him, you are opening people up for deception. And as soon as people start to meet God for themselves, they're going to discover he's better than they ever possibly imagined he could be. Because we need experience. And this is why I don't believe in God by faith. God believes in me, and he equips me to believe in him, but I don't need faith for my relationship with God. And yet we're teaching people you need to have faith in God. No, I need a relationship with God. And my relationship with God enables me to totally trust him because he is good all the time. But if I have faith in him, blind faith in him, which is what evangelicalism really does promote, you have to believe so you can be saved. It's my belief in God that saves me, rather than him saving me so I can believe in what he's done and come to a realization what he's already done. Totally changes the dynamic in that way. And so I bought into that like most of us did. But then when I started to meet God face to face and meet the Father, it was like he took me on a journey of deconstruction to show me I'm not like this. I'm not like that. I'm not like this. You thought I was like this. I'm not like that. I don't require this. I don't require your obedience. I don't require you to serve me. I don't require you to try and please me. Because you're doing that because you don't trust that I already love you, that I'm already pleased with you. All of those dynamics come out of a mixing of covenants. And the new covenant, through evangelicalism, actually is mostly old covenant. Works. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this to be saved. Now, I know it says confess with your heart and believe with your mouth, or confess with your mouth and believe with your heart, but actually that's what you do after you come to the realization. You come to this realization of what the truth is. It's like, yeah, I believe it. And I'm going to tell people about it. But that didn't save me. My confession didn't save me. What he did save me. Everything changes when you come from an experiential relationship with God that does not have to be earned or worked for or deserved in any way. And we can start to be set free from the old covenant works-based mentality that most Christians have bought into or been told is true. And all of us have been deceived by that. You know, it was such a challenge when God started to reveal himself, because it was like, whoa, what do I believe? Well, you don't need to believe anything, just relate to me. That really is what comes to it then. As I know him, then I live out of what I know in him. And I don't want a belief system. I just need a relationship. But it is challenging. When I don't understand why something's happened, like, I don't know, like, you know, recently with my friends died and I'm like, they're all believing in immortality and they're all dead. I'm like, God, what's going on? You know, this is not a good thing when you're trying to preach immortality, that people who believe in immortality are dying. So what's going on? And there's someone else who's had cancer 3 times and actually is alive and seemingly thriving. What's going on? Why them and not them? And God doesn't mind us questioning him. You know, he doesn't mind us saying to him, what's going on, God? I don't understand this. And actually, we're probably incapable of understanding it from a sense of really what's going on. But what I do know, God is good and I can trust him. Ultimately, like when Jesus said some difficult things and the disciples said, you know, everyone left him and ran off. I think it was when he said, you know, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And they all went off. Thousands of them all left. And the disciples, Jesus says to the disciples, well, are you going to leave as well? And they're like, well, where can we go? There's nowhere else we can go. We know who you are. We can't go anywhere else. And although it's really hard, when you don't understand, that is where trust comes in. Do I trust God when I understand what he's doing? Yes, because easy to. Do I trust God when I don't understand what he was doing? Now, that's what happened to me when he took me through the dark cloud experience. It's like, why are you doing this, God? None of this makes sense. You're putting me through misery and pain and darkness, and why are you doing it? And I kicked off big time, wanting to know, questioning in him, challenging him, saying, it's not fair. You know, really, for 3 or 4 months, I went, you know, but in the end, it showed me that actually I don't trust him when I don't know, because I want to be in control, because I want to know, and I want to be able to do what I need to do to be able to do this. I couldn't, and I didn't like it. Well, my soul didn't like it. But in the end, it was like, okay, I've got all this. I either choose to trust you because I don't understand, or I don't. I haven't got any other choices. I can keep on trying to understand and blaming you and questioning you and throwing accusations at you, or I can say, I don't understand. Actually, I actually don't need to understand if I trust you, because ultimately you will bring good out of this, even though I can't see how possibly you could in this situation. You know, I couldn't see how God could bring anything good out of my marriage ending.
Yeah.
I couldn't see any good. I didn't want that. I couldn't see. But ultimately, it was like, okay, I was at that point that I knew I could trust God, but I didn't like it. And I wanted him desperately to change things, but I knew I couldn't ask him to change someone else's mind. All I could ask him to do was like, change me. You know, and ultimately, if I surrender to the process of him changing me, he can change me through any situation or circumstance, even though he didn't want that circumstance or situation. He didn't bring this to teach you a lesson or to train you in something, but he will use it if you let him. And that's where the trust is. I don't understand. Why is this happening? But okay, I'm going to trust you. Therefore, I'm going to take my hands off trying to fix this. That's the thing. But I want to do what's right, you know, to be righteous in it and do what's right. But I can't fix this, because if I try and fix this, it would be, well, okay, let's slip her a fentanyl packet or something, you know, it'd be because you'll be trying to fix it. You know what I mean? And if those thoughts probably come into your head, it's just like, no, that's not the right way of thinking. But those are the humanistic solutions we can come up with. Our only solution is you've got to take that woman out. Basically, I know that you will bring good out of this ultimately, but I want this good now. You know, I want this situation changed now because someone's being harmed, but I can't try and take it off God and try and fix it, because God is working in it, but he's working within the limitations that he's placed on himself to work with people who have choice. And when we pray, we can't make God change somebody else. Otherwise, we're just praying, oh, we don't like this person. Oh, God, can you deal with them? Take them out. Get rid of them.
Maybe like when you pray, though, how about God show us the right lawyer or get us the right judge?
Yes, in a sense, I think you've got to be saying to God, can you open up the possibilities for this to change without, in a sense, doing what he can't do? So he can still guide, he can still direct, he can still give wisdom, he can still give insight to you. What he can't do is just totally change the situation with someone who doesn't want him to do it. But it's hard with mental health. Oh, it's huge because people aren't in their right mind. Why would someone commit suicide? Well, they do all the time because they're not thinking right. Their minds aren't actually right. Now, does God stop anyone committing suicide? Well, maybe there are some stories of miraculous intervention or someone talking to someone and changing their minds or whatever, and maybe that happens. But there's how many millions of people commit suicide every year? Lots. I mean, it's the biggest killer for men under 30 or something.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
You know, so it's despair and hopelessness. Well, it's like, God, do something. Well, he is doing something because he's looking to awaken the world to his love that would bring people into healing and wholeness. And ultimately, the kingdom of God grows like leaven in a lump, bit by bit, slowly by slowly, which changes things in a slowly. But when we're in the situation like you're facing, you don't want it to be slow. It's like, do something now. It's like, I'm desperate now. And you know, telling God how you feel is nothing wrong in that. Being honest and real, he can take that.
Oh, believe me, I tell him how I feel.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. But then ultimately, what are you going to do? Am I going to trust him, or am I going to try and sort it out myself? You know, so it's like, where have I haven't got anywhere else to go, because I know how good God is, and I know he's a loving God. And when it doesn't appear like it, I still trust him, because that's the only option I've got. And I'm not smart enough to figure out all the issues of the world, or even in my own life. So when it comes to that, when I don't understand, I just say, I don't understand. What other option have I got? I wasn't rest in my own soul, but my relationship with God still. When I was with God and when I was engaged with God, I was still loved, and I knew God loved me. I knew God was for me. I never doubted that. But of course, when you're going through the emotions of grief, I guess he carried some of that to help me come through it, because I had to let him do that. I had to sort of almost like, okay, God, I don't want to feel like this for the next, I don't know how long. So I'm just going to hand it over to you. And I felt him, with me in it, but I didn't feel good. You can't feel good when something bad's happening like that. But my relationship with God didn't change. I didn't doubt him. But I struggled with the emotions of the situation and the anger and the fear and, all of the things that are in the air when you're going through something like that. That's real. You can't be in denial. You got to be real. But that didn't affect my understanding of God's goodness and his love. I just couldn't see what good he could bring out of it, other than, well, I won't be miserable as I'm feeling right now. I couldn't really see anything more than he's going to get me through this. But in my relationship with God, I was at rest.
Okay.
I didn't doubt he loved me. I didn't doubt that he was good. I didn't doubt that he was good. I trusted him implicitly, even though, and I didn't feel this was his fault, that he was going to teach me a lesson through this, or he was using, none of those things were part of it. This was what someone else chose to do, which affected me in a way that I didn't want it to work. And God helped me through it. And I was in my time with God, and I felt still at peace and rest in that love. I didn't doubt that. I wasn't in turmoil with God, but I was emotionally upset, hurt, in pain.
Yes.
And angry at times. I went through all the emotions, as you do. And that, but it didn't affect, I didn't ever accuse God of, this is your fault. Yeah. I've served you for how many years? Why have I got to go through this? That wasn't in my thinking, because I actually know how good God is, and I know the truth of his love. So that was my anchor. That was the foundation in which I could still live and I was still, for a long time, I didn't tell anyone what I was going through, because my wife didn't want me to tell anybody. So I kept that to myself until I got to the point where I need to be honest with certain people. And I told you guys, and I told a few other people, because I wanted to be real with people, So I had to trust God, and was able to go through, and no one would have probably known too much. I do not give one single thought in my life to the enemy. I do not give,
regardless of the situation.
Regardless of any situation, I am not going to waste my time blaming, fighting against the enemy. If the enemy comes across me in something that I'm doing for God, and God's given me a mandate to do, and the enemy gets in my way, I will restore that enemy, or he'll run away from me. Well, I'm not going to fight him, because basically I want to restore all that's been lost in the whole of creation. So if some fallen angelic being tries to get in my way or hinder or obstruct me in what I'm doing, I'm going to show love to that being until they give in or run. So I'm not going to fight them.
So do you think guys, I remember even when the airport was going on, you had your intercessors, meeting all the time. Was that sometimes, I'm not saying they were, but oftentimes with all these intercessors and that, is that just kind of a little bit of noise?
Yeah, I think so. Personally, it's almost like, why would you try and twist God's arm to do something he wants to do?
He wasn't turning the tide on things all the time.
But that's not putting like a thing to stop them from trying to go against you or anything like that.
Well, I don't give them any space. I don't give them any thought. I don't think of the enemy. I think of God and his goodness. He is filling my mind and my thoughts. I'm not going to waste time thinking of some negative being who might want to harm me. If I'm living in God's protection and blessing, he ain't going to harm me. So I know who I am. Therefore, I don't give him any thought or give any room in that way. So things happen, but I'm not going to, it's all spooky, spiritual stuff. Sometimes things happen. I trip up, I have an accident. The enemy was trying to get me. No, I just wasn't paying attention.
Give us the tools to, it gives us the tools to stop certain things.
He gives us the tools.
He gives us angels to send out to help.
Of course he does. But that's to help us in who we are. It's not fighting against all this negative stuff going on. It's if I am me, the me God wants me to be, then I don't have to fight anything. I just still have to outwork it. And if something tries to stop me being me, they got no chance. Because if they deliberately try to oppose me, I will just engage them in a restorative way, and they'll run or they'll get restored, because I'm not going to fight or get angry or come and be negative towards anything. Because what purpose does that do? It doesn't solve any problem if I'm fighting. I'm going to use my authority. So sometimes I'll say, stop. You've got no power here. You can't do this. So I'm not saying I don't use my authority that I have in my identity. I absolutely do. But I do it in a loving way, not in a aggressive, angry, or retributive way. Because I want to reflect how God treats me in love. When I'm doing something which is contradictory to what his desire is. He's going to take me out. He's going to change my mind.
See, so I'm thinking more like
so I want to renew other people's minds or other beings' minds. But you're doing positive things there.
It's not fighting
fighting the enemy.
You're not saying take down that bad judge.
You're calling things that be not as if they are. You're making declarations of the truth that you want to see happen. Totally different than, I'm going to come against the enemy today. The enemy's going to bind him and he can't do this and that and the other. It's just like, no, I'm going to waste my time doing that. I'm going to declare what I want to be the truth. I'm going to choose the reality I want to see, aligned to the Father's heart. And there's nothing wrong in doing that.
I remember there's this Pentecostal church, and across the street was this strip place. And they were always interceding. God would break them financially and break the evil spirits of love and all that. And so contrary, they should have, I get it. That wasn't really the way God wanted it. You're not attacking them. You're loving them. God opened them up to the truth and blah, blah, blah. About the angels and just
reveal your love to them, engage them. It's like, but we can put up with that sort of that anger more. We're going to get the enemy, well, the enemy's always under my feet when I know who I am. Therefore, I just have to make sure he knows that I know where he is. But most of the time, I don't even think about the enemy. I'm just thinking about the positive. I want to choose the reality that aligns with the Father's heart, which in this situation is that your granddaughter will be protected and she will actually come through this into a normal, healthy young woman who will be blessed. It's like, call forth the reality of what you want to see to happen. Absolutely. Start decreeing and declaring the things which are the heart of God for this situation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
You don't have to be passive, but you don't have to be aggressive. You know, you calling and choosing a reality is very different than trying to stop something. You know, be positive, focus on the solution and not the problem. That's what I always would say to anyone. What is the solution here? Well, the solution is that God's perfect purpose for this, your granddaughter will be outworked, that she'll come to know the truth of who she is, that this won't actually damage her or hurt her in every situation. You know, you can begin, you get a good judge and a favorable judge who is going to act righteously. Yeah,
so
of course.
all things that are not as though they were, sort of thing, like,
Yeah.
you know, that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, it's like, if I see a situation, I am going to see what is God's heart in this situation. I'm going to focus on that.
Okay.
You know, rather than, well, I'm going to come against this person or that person or this situation. I'm going to be focusing on the positive rather than the negative all the time.
For her, where she said, I have to lie to them.
Yeah.
And we've taken, you said a number of times, can we focus on the truth comes out?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Purify.
Because the truth
light.
is the truth.
Yeah.
Bring the truth coming to the light. Bring light into the situation. You know, and actually you can be praying that she won't be afraid. Perfect love casts out fear. Pray that the love of God will so come on your granddaughter that she won't be afraid to tell the truth. See, that's positive, because the perfect love will cast out fear. So what she needs is perfect love. Then she won't be afraid to speak the truth. So you can be very proactively positive and do that within the confines of love and truth, without having to see this, you know, we're going to come against this, and we're going to come against that spiritual entity, and we're going to do this, and we're going to come against that wicked judge. It's just, okay, yeah, let's have a good judge. So we call for the right person to be appointed in this case. You know, there's nothing wrong in that. But what you don't want to be doing is like, oh, you bring some sickness onto that judge so he gets removed, you know.
Yeah, see, we don't do
God, you know, God wouldn't do that, you know.
We were praying that we got the right judge, and we didn't get the right judge the first time around.
But Mike, I have to be honest, I thought it would work, I would do it.
But sometimes, you see, things come to a point in time that the fullness is ready for the truth to be revealed, not partial. It's like children of Israel come into it. Why didn't they go into there earlier? Because seeming the wickedness of the Ammonites and all those things hadn't yet reached a point where they were going to reap what they sowed. So sometimes things build and build and build until now's the time where things are really going to be seen as true, whereas only part of the truth might have been seen before that. So that's what I, you know.
We even have her on tape where she said Children's Age has reported everything to my mother, and I got in trouble both times. I can't trust them. We actually sent a letter to Children's Aid saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You can't be doing that to her. You've lost your trust.
Yeah.
But you know, the wonderful thing about her is she goes through a garden.
Yeah. Which is that. And
that's how
I encourage her in that she's got a secret safe place that she can go in that. And that's where the love of God can so encounter her that she isn't afraid.
And she said to me, but Papa, is this my imagination? I said, yeah, it starts with your imagination. That's okay.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. We really appreciate you taking the time. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.